I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. China's emergence as a biotech superpower may have appeared to happen suddenly, but it reflected a long-term vision and policies over many years that enabled its success. As biotechnology transforms not only medicine, but also industries such as food, fuel, and materials, the competition between China and the United States to shape the future bioeconomy is intensifying. We spoke to Drew Endy, Associate Professor of Bioengineering and Senior Fellow of the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, about China's all-of-nation strategy, how the United States has misallocated research dollars, and why a cultural embrace of biotechnology will be critical for the success of either nation. Drew, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Danny.
We're going to talk about synthetic biology, its potential to remake manufacturing, and the competition between China and the United States to lead in this area. China has become a biotech powerhouse. A lot of attention has been paid to its emergence as an innovator in biotherapeutics in the last few years, but this is happening in synthetic biology as well. I want to start with the potential for synthetic biology, the engineering of organisms to produce not just medicines, but food, fuel, chemicals, and other materials to transform manufacturing across industries. Can you offer a sense of the emerging bioeconomy over the next decade or so and the opportunity it represents?
Yeah, Danny, thanks for the question. A lot of people, when you hear biotech, your instinct is, what are we talking about? We're talking about food, or we're talking about medicine. Maybe we're talking about biofuels, and so food, medicine, fuel. That's all right. Those are the big chunks, some of the big chunks of today's bioeconomy. But on the frontier of biotechnology, what's happening is, anything we learn to encode in DNA, we can grow it. And so, what am I talking about? The brewing process that you use with yeast to make beer or wine. You can repurpose the yeast by changing their DNA to make pharmaceutical ingredients, the stuff that goes into Narcan, for example. But obviously, that's still medicine. How about some other stuff? Well, that same brewing process can be tweaked further. And instead of making a medicine, you're making an energetic, which is a fancy word for an explosive, which means suddenly you're talking about, how to get resilient supply chains for munitions. And you start to think about NATO and Ukraine and Taiwan and other stuff. Other things, when you look to biology as an engineer, you see what's happening in nature, and it's mind-blowing. There's bacteria that grow magnets, tiny little magnets that can detect the Earth's field. There's sponges in the ocean that grow fiber optic cables. And so there's a whole line of synthetic biology research, which is learning how to grow computer hardware from the bottom up. Things like that, right? So the way I think about it is that biology is a general purpose technology. Anything we can learn to encode in DNA can be grown. And we start from today's bioeconomy, which is food, medicine, and fuel, but it's becoming much broader than that going forward.
In 2015, China unveiled Made in China 2025, a national strategic initiative to transform its manufacturing to become a global leader in high-tech industries. What have we seen so far in the area of biotechnology?
China's taken an all-of-nation approach to biotech going back to about 2020. And one of the things that's important to understand is, why is this happening? And it turns out, of course, there's many reasons. One reason that we miss too often starts with food security. We don't think as a nation as much about food security as I think they do in Beijing. Beijing has a puzzle of feeding 4 times as many people as the United States, with about 3/4 as much farmland, right? And so if that's on your mind and you're looking at biotechnology, you aren't hemming and hawing about whether or not to support it or worry too much about GMO stuff. You're just going to push the go pedal. You're not tapping the brakes. And so when I look at what's happened in China over the last 2+ decades, it's extraordinary. All of nation means parents are supporting this, students are supporting it, leaders at the highest level are supporting it, entrepreneurs and institutions. Let me give you one example. In 2019, I had a colleague from Shenzhen, China, visit Stanford, came over to the house for dinner, and we walked around for hours just talking about synthetic biology. Gentleman's name is Chen-Li Liu. You fast forward to 2025, 6 years later, Chen Li is now the president of the Shenzhen Institute of Advanced Technology. It's apparently the #1 institute in the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Its particular focus is emerging biotechnology, which with a special emphasis on synthetic biology. And what does it mean to be #1? It means you've got the most high impact papers and publications coming out of your research team. You've got the greatest number of entrepreneurs coming through your platform and creating startup companies and so on. And so I was having lunch in France with Chen Li. It's easier for us to meet in Europe than it is for me to go to Shenzhen or for him to come to the US now. And I was having lunch with him the other month. And I was like, how are you doing this? He's like, oh, I have a team of 5,000 people. I have 2,500 staff and I have 2,500 students and postdocs. Right? Like that's a national laboratory for emerging biotechnology built from scratch within half a decade, and they're crushing it. That anecdote is not atypical, right? So an all of nation approach means people who are advancing biotechnology, whether it's education, R&D, entrepreneurship and innovation, or full scale biomanufacturing, they're getting the support they need from their local community, their local government, their regional government, the central government, and as important, the community of people around them. I can give more and more examples, but it's non-trivial what's been accomplished there.
We're at this pivotal moment in seeing biotechnology applied across industries. What are the implications of this over the next decade for China's approach?
Well, you saw, I guess you saw, and maybe Danny, some of your listeners saw what happened when the Congress moved to what was it, the Biosecure Act, in the last Congress or so, and that couldn't get over the finish line in part because it revealed that there were too many dependencies on Wuxi, for our domestic pharmaceutical research ecosystem. So if that's last year, now you're asking me to imagine the next decade. Well, let's just play it out. The infrastructure for biotechnology will be led by China. And that means that the world will increasingly run on China's biotechnology stack. Um, Research and development, innovations in medicine, innovations in food. What was the story of this week? The first transplant of a lung from a pig to a human. Where was that done? I believe it was done in China. The first synthetic plant chromosome was built in China. These things are happening because they have the infrastructure and resourcing to advance the frontiers of biotechnology and translate it. Imagine if computer operating systems, were not invented in the United States of America. Imagine if Unix had not come from Bell Labs in New Jersey. Imagine if iOS and Android and so on had not come from the United States of America. Imagine if the ARPANET had not come from the United States of America. That's what we're staring down, frankly. There's going to be a full technology stack for biotech. There's going to be soft power associated with that and real power. People need what biotechnology can deliver. If the most innovative medicines, the most innovative solutions to climate resilient crops are coming out of China, ourselves and the rest of the world won't have options. We're going to need this stuff. So that's what's at stake.
You talked about the recent problems with passing legislation. Now, I think back to the Obama administration, which had crafted the National Bioeconomy Blueprint, but has there been a comprehensive federal strategy that was ever implemented?
Not yet. Mary Maxon was Dr. Mary Maxon was in the Obama White House on the first Obama administration, and she did a brilliant job drafting this bioeconomy blueprint that you allude to. but it didn't become an executive order. And then the question is, why not? And you have to ask President Obama. My limited understanding is that domestically there were concerns and type of soft opposition to GMOs that gave everybody pause within the administration at the time. And so because of that, things happened like synthetic biology became engineering biology, which if you're outside the field, it's like, why does that matter? But you got to imagine going to a chemistry department and telling all the synthetic chemists that they're no longer synthetic chemists, you're now engineering chemists. You get certain fingers raised back at you, and so that's what happened domestically. We lost about 8 years from 2012 to 2020 on emerging biotech in the U.S. just because of that one example. The first Trump administration in 2019 had a great bioeconomy summit and was also working on an executive order. We didn't get that over the finish line at the time, and the reason was, the nerds were involved, but the economists weren't involved, and so it just kind of died on the vine. The Biden administration did get an executive order through, but it was super well intended, super thoughtful, but frankly, like negligible new appropriations. From memory, I think about $1 billion that was already appropriated through the Pentagon got redeployed to do the biomade effort in Minnesota, which is great. But $1 billion is what the BGI got in Shenzhen back in 2010, just as a fall away loan from 4 real estate families in Hong Kong that said, "Hey, here's $1 billion for your Genomics Institute." And within a year, if I remember right, they had forgiven the loan because the land values in Shenzhen had increased so much they made their money back. And so we have not yet had a coherent national strategy for emerging biotechnology, and we're not in good shape for it.
To what extent does the Trump administration or the current Congress recognize what's at stake?
Yeah, it's a good question. From an administration perspective, the second Trump administration as yet has done nothing substantial on biology or biotech. And moreover, the hits to the research ecosystem, the funding cuts, and other things have weakened our competitiveness and standing with respect to biotechnology, which is very different than the first Trump administration. First Trump administration was strong on biotech. Danny, if you were to ask me today, like who's in the White House on bio and biotech and biosecurity, I couldn't tell you. And so that's both actually dangerous in terms of biosecurity and competitively a significant blunder, I would say. On the congressional side, we do have the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechnology, and they published their report earlier this year. Anybody can find it, biotech.senate.gov. It's a good commission, and they're calling for $15 billion in net new money over 5 years, which is a fine start. But if we wanted to actually win the future, I'd add a 0 to that number. I think we need to be spending about $30 billion a year over the next 5 years. That's a big number, but the way to think about it is what's at stake economically. In rough sense, right now, the bioeconomy, which is the global domestic product, realized through biotechnology is about $4 trillion a year, of which the United States has 1. As we unlock biology as a general purpose technology, that $4 trillion a year globally could go as high as 30 trillion. So if I frame that strategically to the president, like Mr. President, right now the United States has 1 of $4 trillion a year. That 4 is going to 30 trillion. How much of the 30 do you want? And how much do you want, or how much do you want to have leverage over? And so spending $30 billion a year to get up to $20 trillion a year of net new economic growth is a bargain. Getting this economic growth, by the way, is probably the best path we have for solving the federal budget issue, right? With revenue and expenditures. So I'd say greenfield with respect to the administration. I dearly hope the Trump administration hits the go pedal on the bioeconomic opportunity through emerging biotechnology while mitigating and managing and leading on biosecurity. It's a win-win-win-win. The Congress has a fine start, and I'll argue for it, but I'll also argue that we need a lot more, and we need to add a 0 to what they're calling for.
You have called biomanufacturing the snowflake on the tip of the iceberg. What did you mean by that?
Think about all the things biology can grow. Think about how we're going to get 1,000 factories in the United States of America within the next 10 years, forming a biobelt for biomanufacturing. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I went to school next to Bethlehem Steel. My mom grew up on the Ohio River in Western Pennsylvania. We used to see, massive manufacturing facilities in the case of steel, right? But these facilities are on flat land next to forest and river. They're perfect for scaled biomanufacturing. So how are we going to get a biobelt? How are we going to get hundreds of billions of dollars appropriated or directed by the private markets to build out 1,000 factories, a biobelt for the United States? That's part of the rest of the iceberg. But then there's another part of it, which is biology is different in terms of manufacturing. We're used to centralized factories only and industrial manufacturing, but biology also supports distributed manufacturing. The leaves on trees don't come from a factory, they just grow where the tree is because the energy and materials arrive where the biology is going to grow. If you understand what's going on in emerging biotech, we can imagine something that I call the bionet coming into existence over the next 10 to 15 years. The internet we know about, that was developed to create communication resilience. So no matter where you were, you could have a conversation through the internet. The bionet allows us to coordinate the manufacturing through growing of products and objects we need where we need them. So imagine having, at any level you want, it could be a town, it could be a district in the House of Representatives, it could even be your house. Imagine having the ability to download DNA code and use that to program a biomanufacturing process that operates locally so that whatever you need, you have the option of making it locally as a complement to the centralized industrial supply chains and logistics systems.
You've said the United States is grossly misallocating biotechnology research dollars and that it could lead in this area by smartly spending a few $billions. The idea is that government should fund high risk foundational research. I suspect most people would think that's what it's already investing in, but where's the money going today and how should that change?
Yeah, it's a great question and comment. Let's look at the newest federal agency that was created under President Biden for advancing health and biotechnology. It's called ARPA-H, an Advanced Research Project Agency for Health, right? Got off the ground to great effect. Um, well, the mission of ARPA-H is to improve the health of Americans as soon as possible, to cure diseases now. And who wouldn't want that? It's hard to argue against that. And the issue is there are infinite applications of biotechnology to solve immediate problems. There's so many diseases to cure, so many manufacturing opportunities to unlock, so many things to do to help with biodiversity and nature. We have unending applications of biotechnology. But if you look at something like ARPA-H, this example proves the point. It's set up to cure diseases now, to help Americans now. There is no other area of emerging technology that we've treated this way. Um, Imagine being a computer scientist and only really being able to get funding to write a mobile phone app that helps a patient or a doctor tomorrow with something they have to deal with tomorrow. If you said, "Hey, I want to get money to make a new programming language or a new operating system or new software compiler," everybody would go, "I'm sorry, what disease does that cure?" And the answer would be, it doesn't cure any disease directly. It just makes it easier overall for everybody to help cure and treat disease and prevent disease. So if you look at the history of emerging tech, go back 40, 45 years, 50 years, we invested in packet switching networks to get to ARPANET that became the internet. Um, we would not do projects like today in biotech with public money because it doesn't solve any immediate problem. It would imagine being in the Defense Department back in 1975 and you're asking yourself, "Hey, this work on packet switching networks, how does it help the Marine on the beach tomorrow?" And the answer would be, I don't know, it doesn't. And be, well, no internet, right? That's sort of the situation that we're confronting. And I think democracies, frankly, have a harder time with this because the appropriators in the Congress have to be responsive to the demands of the constituents as they should. And so the money tends to go to what people want right now, which is treatments and cures and solutions, as opposed to this deeper investment. The public money, though, really needs to go into the foundations. And then those innovations need to translate into the private sector where it gets lit up with competition. We've run this playbook over and again for every other tech, but biotech's just got this out of order situation. I do agree that if you wanted me to be lean on the federal budget, meaning spend less money, I am confident we could get more bang for buck, and even cut budgets by smartly spending money on the foundational innovations in biotechnology and bioscience.
Are there some examples of the types of investments you'd like to see the U.S. government make?
Yeah, I'll give you. It's a good question. Lots of ideas. Let me give you three specific ones. Um, the Constitution gives the Congress the responsibility of creating the system of weights and measures. This is what undergirds our economy. When you go to the gas pump, you get a gallon of gas. You know it's a gallon of gas because somebody's keeping track of what a gallon is. The place in the government where this happens is under the Department of Commerce. There's a crown jewel in the Department of Commerce called NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And this is where we keep track of the meter and the kilogram and the second, and we get better at measuring seconds. I want NIST to get $250 million of net new money, $250 million a year, to create a biomeasurement laboratory. And the purpose of the biomeasurement laboratory, its mission is to get better at measuring biology and create standards that support coordination of labor for biotechnology stuff broadly. Um, it's so esoteric. Let me give you an example from the realm of time. If you can measure time with resolution of minutes, you can have a schedule, you can run a train system, you can have meetings. If you can get better at measuring time and measure it with the precision of a second, you could have a race that's pretty long race, like 1,000 meters or a marathon or a swim meet. But if you could measure with the resolution of tenths of seconds, maybe you could have a 100-meter dash or a 50-meter, freestyle race in the pool. If you could measure to fractions of a second, then we can do GPS. We can see where those satellites are and where I am on Earth by measuring the time it takes the radio signal to go back and forth. And that gets me all sorts of economic opportunity. And you can just keep going. So as you get better at measuring something, unbelievable economic opportunity unlocks. How do we measure DNA? How do we measure genes being turned on and off? What happens as we get better at measuring biology? All sorts of coordination within the bioeconomy becomes possible. All sorts of improved reliability and confidence in medicines and biomaterials arises. So example number one, create a biomeasurement laboratory at NIST. It's unbelievable return on investment. Example number two, anybody working in biotechnology, gosh, you want to be smart and hardworking, but in order to be a world leader, you have to have the best tools in the world. If you don't have the right tool for the job, if you don't have the best tool available, you're not going to be competitive. The only way to guarantee that we have the best tools is to be inventing the tools. And so we should create what I call a national biotechnology accelerator. The mission of this entity, this should probably be under the Department of Energy. The mission of the National Biotech Accelerator is not to solve any immediate biotechnology problem, but look at where our time and money goes when anybody does a biotech project, use that to create a priority queue of opportunities for improving the workflows where the time and money goes, and then unleash professional teams to upgrade how we spend our time and money. By doing this, we will guarantee that we have world-leading tools for biotechnology. By having world-leading tools for biotechnology, we'll have a chance of being competitive. The secret sauce of Silicon Valley is not only the venture capitalists, but the fact that we have tool innovators who are always improving how we write software, how we build chips, and so on. We have to carry that mindset over into the world of biotechnology if we want to lead into the future. Let me just give you those two to start with.
You've said whichever nation learns to fall in love with biotechnology first will have a significant competitive advantage. You've said the cultural context, support for engagement with biotechnologies are going to matter most in the long run. Can you explain?
Well, we thank you for your question. It's an astute question, Danny. We talked about how in Obama 1, right, there were concerns around GMOs, and because of that, we didn't get an executive order for biotechnology, right? So we have plenty of evidence to know that when people are not comfortable with biotechnology or any technology for that matter, it becomes difficult to develop it and translate it and have it develop in ways that have a chance of solving problems. maybe I'll just tell a personal anecdote. Couple years ago, our oldest child came back from third grade. He goes to public school in Palo Alto, California. My wife and I both work in biotechnology, and we were in the kitchen getting ready for dinner, and without any prompting, our third grader said, "GMOs are evil." Like, can you believe it? It's just like, hey, mom and dad, GMOs are evil. Right? It's like unsolicited declaration. And so my wife and I look at each other. We're like, what do we do now? Eye contact. Don't say anything. It's because we don't want to lock in this kid's opposition to our livelihoods. Um, and then it got worse. Then we watched the latest Jurassic World movie, and the name of the evil multinational corporation was Biosyn, which is a transposition of SynBio, which is what Dad does, synthetic biology, and the CEO of Biosyn looks like Tim Cook from Apple, and I had a kid somehow, right? And so like now Dad's evil. Now not just GMOs are evil, but Dad's evil, right? And so it's a funny anecdote. It's also real, right? And so what do you do about this? The thing that made a difference with respect to our family was a company operating out of Idaho and Michigan called Light Bio that is selling bioengineered petunias that are GMOs and that are weakly bioluminescent. And so you can go online and you can buy a petunia, and it just barely glows in the dark. So one winter break, I got some of these bioluminescent plants, and I gave them to our oldest son and his younger brother. And I said, "Hey guys, here are your night lights. They're not normal night lights. You don't plug them in. There's no battery. You got to water them and put them in the sun, so they power up." And their older cousins were visiting, and they went into the bathroom and turned out the light and shut the door to take a look at these bioluminescent plants. And they came out 5 minutes later and they just said, "Cool. Like, this biotech stuff's cool." Right. And that changed my house. That changed my life. Right. And so now apply that broadly to all of biotechnology. How many people are excited about vaccines? How many people are in love with vaccines? It's like, oh, we're navigating a pretty challenging time when it comes to vaccines right now. How many people are in love with GMOs? Not everybody, at least, right? And so, if people are not in love with the technology, it's hard to really figure out what it could be. When I was a young kid in Pennsylvania, my mom bought a knockoff Apple computer. It's called a Franklin Ace. And I love that thing because it was my computer. When our house almost burned down and we had to evacuate, the thing I saved from the house was the computer carried out into the driveway. Right? Imagine how important that is to help advance the technology when people care about it in this very personal way. And I think what I'm seeing in China, to return to that, is they're falling in love with biotechnology because they're learning how to use biotechnology with their terms and conditions to solve problems and to have fun and to do things that are meaningful to them. And we have to figure out how to navigate that here as well.
Curing cancer, freeing us from fossil fuels, or feeding the world wasn't enough. You've got to get glow in the dark flowers.
Yeah. Yeah, it has, like, when a technology becomes personal, then we can relate to it. Intel's got a tough time right now, but I remember growing up, Intel had a brilliant marketing campaign called Intel Inside. People were selling computers that people were buying, and the Intel chip was inside, and they ran this jingle. It said Intel Inside. When biotechnology went to market 50 years ago with Genentech and Genencore and teams like that, and we got recombinant insulin, which was a boon to say the least, for treating diabetes, it didn't get marketed as genetic engineering inside or GMO inside. It didn't become a point of pride. People didn't fall in love with it broadly. Some people did because they understood what was going on, but not in the same way that we did with computing, at least not yet.
And do you see that changing?
It has the potential to change. The sorts of things we're calling for include a national library system. Not library, but replace the first letter I in library with letter A, you get a library. So I'd like to end the decade with 3,000 public labs staffed by librarians that help people learn about biology and biotechnology all throughout the nation. And we've got proposals for doing that now. Another example is something I started over 20 years ago this genetic engineering Olympics for high schoolers and college students called iGEM. We have 5,000 students a year, half of them from China, competing in a summer-long Olympics for biotechnology. The projects within the iGEM are extraordinary. There's a team, for example, last year from Marburg, Germany, that was working with dandelions from Uzbekistan, I think. The certain strain of dandelions make a lot of latex for rubber. And the idea was, could you get sustainable rubber production by bioengineering these dandelions to be easier to farm? Anybody who's weeded a yard and tried to get dandelions out of a yard know that when you go to pull a dandelion, the stem breaks off and the roots stay, and you get more dandelions later. So it's hard to farm dandelions. So these kids in Germany, in Marburg, were reprogramming root morphogenesis, the shape that roots form in these dandelions, so they'd be more like carrots, if you can believe that. So they'd be easier to farm, right? And so that team was having a blast, right? They were learning a lot. They were becoming empowered. They were solving a problem that mattered to them. And so I think giving people access and agency can really go a long way to helping people understand a technology and develop it and use it on their own terms.
Drew Endy, Associate Professor of Bioengineering and Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. Drew, thanks so much for your time today.
Danny, thanks for your interest and conversation. Really grateful to be connected.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send an email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.